In this very room, about 4 years ago, our guest sat here and said, there is going to be an economic turndown. And we went, yeah, okay, fine. It happened. And this prophet is back with us.
I'm not exactly a prophet.
Richard Croak, bankruptcy attorney, and someone who used to be with the Justice Department. And let me get all your credentials on here. You're a member of the Federal and New York State Bar Association. You served as an attorney for the Justice Department. You have an American Board certification in both business and consumer bankruptcy, and you're also a seer.
No.
So nice to have you with us.
It's great to be back.
How do you feel that actually we're joking about it, but that actually happened in this room? You were a prophet, and you saw that coming, and you saw something a lot of other people didn't see.
Well, that was the fact that we were noticing these mortgages coming in with nothing underneath them. I mean, and it was one after another, and they were doing it on the basis of insurance. And if those mortgages failed, then the insurance was going to have to come into play, and that was it. And once those insurances came into play, there was going to be a big debt. So that's what happened. It sort of dominoed. One fell after the other.
Now, do you see it turning around right now, or are we just going to remain flat for a while? Where do you think we're headed?
Well, I think it's going to remain flat for a while. I don't see any major upsurge in the economy.
Now, for folks, not everybody, you hear a lot of terms, and one of the terms is bankruptcy. What exactly is bankruptcy, and what does it mean to an individual who has to file for bankruptcy?
Well, filing for bankruptcy is a very legal thing. I mean, you file a petition with the federal government and the federal court system in a special court, that's bankruptcy court. And you're in bankruptcy when you have a petition pending. And that's a very tight definition.
And what exactly is the role of a bankruptcy attorney? Someone, I guess they would hit a point where, like, oh my God, I got to pay this, I got to pay that, and you start having people making those phone calls to your home, or sometimes they're knocking on your door. We're going to throw you out of this apartment, or we're going to take back your car, or repossess your house, or something. You know, and they get overwhelmed.
Well, the role of the attorney is basically to step in there and get them into a situation where they're not going to lose anything. And that's the basic premise we have of putting you back on your feet without losing your property.
Now, you have said to me, going through some old notes, you said there is always a solution. So for those folks that are in precarious financial situation today watching, would you talk about that and kind of reassure them?
Well, I mean, there's always a solution in the concept that the bankruptcy isn't just one thing. Most bankruptcies are, yes, what they call liquidations, where most people come in, they shed their debt, and because their property is exempt, that means they don't have to lose it. They keep their house, they keep their car in bankruptcy. So that's a solution that covers maybe 70-80% of the people. The rest of them, though, they may have a situation where the mortgage is behind, or there's a student loan they can't pay, or something else. They have to go into what's called a reorganization. And particularly right now, this time of year, or any time of year, people have tax problems. If you've got that tax problem, then you need to see an attorney, because bankruptcy has a lot of ways to deal with taxes.
What is, we're talking about bankruptcy, what does it mean to file Chapter 7?
Well, Chapter 7 is one chapter of a bankruptcy code that has a number of chapters. All the other chapters are what they call reorganization chapters.
Okay.
So Chapter 7 is a liquidation chapter. I often...
And the word liquidation, for those who may not know?
Well, it means we're going to take stuff and we're going to liquidate it and we're going to pay the creditors.
Okay, so that would be sell-off stuff.
That would be sell-off stuff. 97% of Chapter 7 cases are what they call no-asset cases. That means they have nothing to sell off to anybody. That's pretty much an individual case. That's because you have exemptions. You have your homestead exemption, you have your car exemption, you have your bank account exemption.
What's a homestead exemption?
Homestead exemption is how much of the equity in your house you're allowed to keep from your creditors. So in a state like Texas or Florida, that's 100%. So if you have a $5 million house and it has no mortgage on it, you get to keep $5 million with the house.
Okay.
Congress a few years back tried to pass some legislation to try to prevent people from moving to states like that and buying a big house and shielding all their assets. But that hasn't worked out real well for Congress. They should try again. Most states, though, have a limited exemption. California and New York, it's like $150,000. Going down in New York in some counties to $75,000. But that's
so
above your mortgage.
If you own a house valued from $75,000 to $150,000, your house is safe?
It don't work that way.
Okay.
Nobody buys the house outright. They buy the house for, $300,000. They have a $250,000 mortgage. And even if their homestead exemption is only $75,000, the house is exempt.
Okay.
What they have to do there in that situation is pay the mortgage.
Okay.
Now, what's happening now in a lot of places, they can't pay the mortgage, or that the house value has gone from $300,000 to $200,000. There is a limited ability to do something about that in bankruptcy, and particularly in some bankruptcy courts. Now, bankruptcy is supposed to be a national institution, but it doesn't work the same way every place. So you really need to see an attorney to find out how it might help you with that mortgage you can't quite pay back anymore.
Okay, if you are in debt and you file for bankruptcy and things are taken care of, that would mean, in a sense, like if you were like $200,000 in debt and you were, cleared of that obligation, that's really like $200,000 in income along the way. Does the federal government or the state step in and say, okay, we're going to tax you on that now?
Well, that used to be a problem when I started in this business.
Okay.
But along the way, the IRS has become persuaded of the opinion that when you file bankruptcy, your debt is not forgiven.
Okay.
It's dispersed in some way. So for the IRS's purposes, if you file a bankruptcy, there is no tax consequence. Now, you see a lot, particularly on the internet, these guys that promise you that they're going to take your debt and they're going to pay pennies on the dollar, and you don't have to file bankruptcy. Yeah, if it worked, you'd have to pay taxes on it.
Okay.
Because that's not a forgiveness of debt. Okay, that's something you got.
Right.
The other part of it is that it rarely works. And if it does, it may not work the way you think it does. All right? You may get a settlement with 50% of your creditors. And that would be really good for most of these people. The other 50 sue you, they get judgments, and you got terrible problems, and you have to go see an attorney, and you have to file bankruptcy anyway. So you might as well start there as opposed to getting yourself into that kind of bind.
Now, what does it mean to file for bankruptcy Chapter 13? Moving along the chapters.
13 is a reorganization chapter, and we call it a super discharge because we can handle debts that you normally can't handle in a bankruptcy. The big example is the mortgage.
Okay.
You can take that mortgage, and if the bank is demanding full payment in full now because you defaulted, you can make them step back and start the payments again. Student loans, they're not dischargeable, not even in Chapter 13, but you can schedule them and you can start making payments even if they're in default. All right. Child support. All right, people get behind in their child support and they're going to court and they're being dragged back and forth in the court. You can sort of stop the merry-go-round. You put it into the Chapter 13, it'll be paid before anything else, and they'll catch you up in your child support. So that's what it does. In particular, what it does is it handles those people from the IRS and the tax department who are coming to you and asking you for money, because even if that is non-dischargeable tax debt, what we call non-dischargeable, it's a priority claim, and you can schedule that and pay them and nobody else.
Which type of bankruptcy do you recommend, or I think the answer is going to be it depends on the situation, filing Chapter 7 or filing Chapter 13?
Well,
it depends on the situation, right?
It depends on the situation. A good attorney, one that's doing his job, will almost always find himself filing almost as many Chapter 13s as Chapter 7s.
Okay.
Okay? Because sometimes, notwithstanding what you think, it's cheaper to file a 13, even though you're making payments, than it is to file a 7. For example, in a lot of courts now, if you have a second mortgage that is behind a first mortgage, and the first mortgage has eaten up the entire equity in your house. In other words, it's a $200,000 house. The first mortgage is $210,000, and the second mortgage is $50,000, because once upon a time it was a $300,000 house. That second mortgage will disappear in the 13, and that's $50,000. If you file the 7, it's going to stay there on your house, and even if you're not paying it, you won't be able to sell your house. You won't be able to, accumulate any equity in the house.
You were talking about mortgages and mortgage modifications. What does that mean?
Well, the government has a whole modification program, and anybody who's getting foreclosed or who's in the process of getting foreclosed probably knows that, because they've heard from the lender that they're probably eligible for a modification program. And that's a very frustrating thing, because the people fill out the paperwork and they send it in, they fill out the paperwork and they send it in, they fill out the paperwork and they send it in, and the bank never gets it, or it loses it, or it goes stale. I mean, literally, we had a case not more than a week ago where the bank came back to me and said, well, all your paperwork is stale. And I said, what does that mean? And they said, well, it's not up to date. I said, well, we gave it to you 2 months ago, and it was exactly up to date when we gave it to you. Yes, but it's 2 months behind now. So,
and that's their fault. They
held on to it for 2 months.
Right.
They worked on it, whatever. And now they say, whoa, it's 2 months out. So that's one of those things that you might want to see a lawyer about. You might want to see somebody who's doing it on a regular basis. You doesn't have to be a lawyer even.
Right.
Although the Congress managed to cut all the support for those not-for-profit groups that were doing this. But, to do a modification, you really need somebody to sit there and say, okay, fill this paperwork out, fill it out this way, and stay on the bank's back. You can do that yourself, though. I mean, if you want to get a modification, what you have to do is be persistent. In other words, call them every day.
Do you think it's beneficial to get a mortgage modification to some people?
For most people, it is, yeah.
Right.
It's like winning the lottery. You probably got one chance in 7. And if you get it, you probably save yourself a couple $100 a month. But I'm telling people now, and this is something that everybody should be aware of. A lot of people have escrows on their mortgages.
Right.
And they keep saying, I have a fixed rate mortgage, but the amount keeps going up. And you have to say to them, the escrow is going up because your property taxes are going up. And the chances are, 9 out of 10 times you've been overassessed, because even if you were properly assessed when you bought the house, when the market went down, the assessor didn't come around and lower your assessment. So really, to cut the monthly bill, what you might want to do is see about getting your taxes changed, your assessment changed on your property.
Can you request an assessor in a municipality come back to review your house and what is correct?
No, what you have to do is you have to file a grievance on the appropriate day in the various counties.
Okay.
To grieve your assessment.
So it's different anywhere all around the world?
Yeah, it's different in each state. It's different in each county. It's different in each city, and it's different. Just about any place you want to go. No two places are going to be exactly the same. So you have to actually ask them.
What advice would you have for someone as we wrap it up, just to stay financially solvent and the right course?
Well, I think you got to look at your debt, and before you take on any new debt, you got to really determine whether you can pay it back. And you've also got to be aware that something may happen. Most people file because something happened: a divorce, a lost job, medical bills, which are big now.
Right.
So something may happen. If you're one of the unfortunate people that something happens to, then you come and see me. So don't be one of the unfortunate people. Have some place you can turn when the unfortunate thing happens.
Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us. And if folks want to get information from Richard Croak, I bet you got a website address.
Yes, we've got richardcroak.com or albanybankruptcy.com.
Oh, I want to thank you very much for joining us. You always give us great financial information and always look into the future. You're a very special seer.
All right.
I'm Joe Condon. Our guest has been Richard Croak, bankruptcy attorney. Thank you very much for joining us, and stay solvent and have a wonderful day.